We were trying to find various ways of bringing artists and scientists into dialogue with one another, and this is how Common Ground came into life.
Alex and I, we'd already worked with artists before, and also part of my PhD research is to think about different modes of knowledge production with respect to art science, like how can we create something that is in between those two worlds, art and science, and brings them also together.
For us, like the project actually started, we're working with two scientists. We went scuba diving in Tanzania to basically look at the different kind of coral and the different kind of organisms that were in the ocean. And you know, from that experience, like exchanging different conversations with the scientists and myself and Tabita also exchanging, there was this kind of organic chemistry that came about where kind of art and science or art and also spirituality, or science and spirituality, this cosmos of all of these different kind of fields kind of came together to birth like this sacred kind of object and temple.
Yeah, it was quite interesting that Alex and Anja, they wrote a little text after having decided that they wanted to work with Yussef and Tabita. And in this text, they stressed that they chose to work with Tabita because she was an artist who had this intimacy with the natural world, and that she had a relationship to both the physical worlds and the spiritual worlds. And they regarded this as something that they, as scientists, could learn from, and that's why they wanted to work with her.
I think Tabita and Yussef, they were so fascinating because they're very different from people we had worked with before, because in a way, it was much more abstract. Before, it was a lot about architecture, and it was some physical, something physical we would do. I could do physical experiments testing different types of architecture. But with Tabita and Yussef, it was very much about the conceptual work and what does it mean to bring those two different perspectives together, science and and their spiritual practice mostly.
Specifically with Anja and Alex, they were amazing to work with because they have I think the reciprocity is there. You know, they were open to kind of learn different ideas from us, and also we were able to, you know, but also teach us in the same way, different ideas from their perspectives, you know, even teach us how to dive properly, you know, or to even feel safe in a sense underwater.
Yeah, that resulted really in a collaboration, I feel, that had a lot of impact on all of them. It was also a new experience for us at Schering Stiftung. And I do hope that it also has an impact on the visitors seeing this exhibition and seeing various forms of knowledge coming together. Alex Jordan and Anja Wegner were the two biologists from the Max Planck Institute for Animal Behavior that applied for the call, and then we presented various artists to them, and they chose to work with Tabita and Yussef. And they really made a huge commitment because they took them on a travel to Tanzania in Africa.
Yeah, it was really the being in the place, being in the water together, the diving together. They trusted us very much because they were new divers, and they learned how to dive in Zanzibar. And later we took them to Kigoma, to Lake Tanganyika. And it was beautiful. They trusted us in the water. We were their guides underwater.
Scuba diving underwater taught me so much about just like the weight of my own body. Like, it taught me how to breathe in a totally different way. It taught me how the movement of the currents and things are very strong, very powerful. It taught me about the diversity of how many organisms are in the coral reefs, and it taught me about also scarcity, because in certain places there wasn't that many organisms. It was a teacher in itself, like the water itself. So I feel like if we talk about collaboration, the scientists are really important Tabita is really important, myself is really important, but I don't want to leave out like the water.
So it's quite interesting how we, in this exhibition, how we have flowing into one another of various fields like architecture, ecology, spirituality, and biology. We can literally see that with the temple. It's one space where you have the spiritual realm that is connected to water. That is something maybe not so present in our religion, but in the Yoruba culture you have a strong relationship with water, and there's a whole realm, spiritual realm about it, and I think you can see and feel that in the temple.
There's a vastness to water itself, you know? Water is kind of like the first atmosphere where life kind of existed, you know? So Yemoja, she's like the beginning, you know, the beginnings of life in many ways. She symbolizes so many other types of things, fertility, abundance, just water kind of in general, ocean water.
Especially when you think about the water, biologically it's evolutionary, it's the origin of all life, you know, on this planet. And then it's just so beautiful to see that in so many spiritual practices, and of course the Yoruba religion, but also so many other cosmologies. Water is the origin of everything, and Yemoja also is the spirit of the water, the mother of all fishes, but also the mother of life in general, is somehow, I think it shows us that we, and with we I mean the human species, as one animal, we are already for thousands of years, we knew that the water is important.
You know, water is this, it's an element that also holds a lot of memory. You know, there's so much memory in water. You know, there's so many, actually even unseen kind of geometries in the shapes of water. Like when you freeze water, it turns into a different kind of like geometry. When it's running water, that's a different kind of like, you know, a different kind of makeup of like molecules. Or when it's rain, when it's waves, when it's, I mean, water is so kind of diverse. It has this adaptability to kind of morph and form based on the architecture, based on the kind of environment it's in. It's highly adaptable. So for me, that's how I feel about Yemoja as well. She is always kind of there to produce metamorphosis and change kind of within me personally. And I think that's also what she reflects kind of in the world as well. It's like this constant like life-giving element, constantly you know, giving us abundance, constantly kind of supporting and being like that mother kind of nurturing energy that the world kind of needs, you know. On Earth you have land, and then you have a vastness, kind of this abundance of water, you know. So water is like essential to our lives, and that's how I kind of connect with Yemoja.
As a field biologist, I think every field biologist has a very deep connection to the place they work in. For me, it's the water, the ocean, and it's almost rituals you do. The work you do is very repetitive, so it feels like a very deep connection to a place, also to the organism you work with. But nobody would call it spiritual. But it feels more than just scientific, right? There's something more to it. And it was beautiful to see how Tabita and Yussef, they approached the water from that spiritual perspective, because they had never dived before, and for them it was already part of their lives, and they were already doing offerings before they ever saw what happens underwater. And so it was beautiful to see how they had this very deep connection with the water through that spiritual lens. And in a way, it's very similar feelings, because it's very passionate, it's very emotional, but it comes from this sacredness of the water and the offerings for the spirit. And for us, it's more this, we feel also through our practices, through our research, so connected to those places. So I think in the end, it's a similarly deep connection, but from this spiritual angle, and I thought it was really beautiful, and it also made me reflect on what is the water for me, how do I connect to the different organisms in the water, and what's my what are my different relationships with those fish.
For the first time, we have built a temple at Schering Stiftung, which is not something that you would expect maybe from a project like this, because it's associated very much with a religious and a sacred architecture.
The real sacred, for me at least, you know, the sacred aspect is contemplation, you know. I think that having a space where you can sit down, kind of reflect and think about the water in totally different ways and try and somehow reverence or even reflect on different organisms in the water that we don't necessarily see, that initiates or catalyzes the sacredness in it for me.
It's the sacred place, and it's something we humans make sacred through our behaviors. And we thought would be beautiful to have this juxtaposition in a way of like the human architecture, and then to have aquatic animal architects tell their stories and why they do the architecture they do, and also to lend them our voices, which the four of us who were part of the collaboration, Tabita, Yussef, Alex, and I, we tell some of their stories. And I think for me it's the idea of bringing together the human and the non-human.
The work in the temple is designed to basically invite people to have their own kind of observation or contemplation kind of experience, listen to the sound, think about the different, or look at the different kind of microorganisms from underwater, you know, try and understand or listen to Yemoja's presence as well. And also you can give a libation in this space as well. The program is also very much so a factor in its sacredness. So on one hand, you have the technical kind of aspects of design, but on the other hand, it's also the program and the ritual and ceremony, or the path of walking or pilgrimage within the temple that also kind of makes it sacred as well. Inside the temple, there will be 3 different kind of elements and materials that you can give an offering to Yemoja or the waters with, and that's honey, different flowers, and also indigo, kind of the mixture of indigo and water to make almost like a dye. So Yemoja was actually a dyer, you know, in the cosmological kind of stories. She was the queen of indigo, a master kind of dyer. So even in the process of the materiality of the temple, you know, was all dyed in Nigeria using like age-old traditional kind of techniques of indigo dyeing. You know, some of the patterns are cosmological patterns that follow the lineage of like Adire and these different age-old techniques of dyeing. But also you have like the scientific symbolism of like all of the unseen kind of microorganisms, the diatoms, the different kind of currents of water. Also from like the aerial view, looking at water samples on the full moon, looking at water samples and how the earth kind of moves on the new moon. Like all of those are like symbolic motifs that are also embedded in the fabrics.
You've been walking through a space, you've been walking through an architecture, you realize it as a special space, and then you see the headphones and you put on the headphones, and in the headphones you hear this narration about animals, insects, fish that also create architecture to live underwater, and that have these very special forms of architecture to survive also underwater and to catch prey. And I think here is very much where the realms come together and where knowledge really becomes fluid, and where biology, architecture and spirituality cross paths.